On the Irish History Boys, why is there no integrated education in Northern Ireland? I'll tell you why. It goes back to 1925. We're discussing the attempts by the Unionist government to introduce integrated education. And we'll be discussing who killed John F. Kennedy. It wasn't me. Do you know where I was? I was just dating. The Irish History Boys were also answering your questions. Don't miss it. Me and Cormac Moore having banter about history.
The Education Act, a doomed act. Both a moderator and ex-moderator of the General Assembly protested within the past 3 or 4 days against the manner in which Sir James Craig ignored members of their fate when appointing Justices of the Peace and other functionaries. The Prime Minister is a Presbyterian, but it was bluntly alleged that he had not been faithful and strong-minded when certain unseen hands impelled him from the path of his duty to Presbyterianism. It is a domestic quarrel which the owners of the mysterious hands and the aggrieved members of the Assembly will fight out or settle without worrying the masses of the people. But the General Assembly's direct attack on the Education Act, the Amending Act, and Lord Londonderry is a more serious matter. All the public are, or should be, deeply concerned with questions affecting education. The General Assembly have practically demanded the expulsion of the Marquis of Londonderry from the government, and at the same time proclaimed themselves denominationalists in principle and practice. In short, the Education Act has broken down. It has been broken down and to all intents and purposes demolished by the General Assembly's decree that no schools presently under Presbyterian control and influence shall be transferred until the government definitely and directly provide for Bible instruction for Presbyterians, only in each and every school so situated.
Hello and welcome to the Irish History Boys with me, Tim McGarry.
And me, Cormac Moore.
The podcast where we explore Irish history inspired by what was reported 100 years ago and 50 years ago in the pages of the Irish News. And you heard Dr. Cormac Moore and his beautiful Leash Lilt reading there about the Education Act, a doomed act according to the Irish News of 1925. With the doomed act we're talking about is a proposal by the Unionist government, somewhat surprisingly, to introduce integrated education into Northern Ireland, to have an integrated education system. I need to declare a slight interest here. I am a long-time supporter of the Integrated Education Fund in Northern Ireland, which means it entitles me to do free gigs for them all the time.
Sounds great. For them.
Surprise, surprise. I'm doing a free gig for them in the Ulster Hall on the 16th of October, by the way. Get your tickets now for the Integrated Education Fund. Stand up for integrated education. So this is a topic close to my heart, and a lot of people wouldn't realise, because we have discussed in previous episodes about partition, about the setting up of Northern Ireland. We've discussed things like gerrymandering for employment, the manipulation of the electoral system, getting rid of PR and stuff like that. Yeah. But there was a proposal by the Unionist government, particularly one cabinet member, Lord Londonderry, who
a very interesting character.
A very interesting character. A proposal basically one single integrated system of education for all pupils in Northern Ireland. And here we have the General Assembly, the Presbyterian General Assembly, basically saying, no, we're not having that. We want our own schools. I think the Catholic Church probably were sympathetic to that position as well, were they?
So like it was called the Londonderry Act, the Education Act of 1923, that was introduced by Lord Londonderry. Was opposed by the Catholic Church, which wasn't surprising because it was going to take out kind of the control that the religions would have in running, managing, financing the schools, and also there's going to be less kind of religious kind of elements on the curriculum as well. So the Catholic Church naturally was totally opposed to that. And look, there's other things as well. Like they also were proposing that there have to be civic lessons about the Empire and Northern Ireland, and the flag should be the Union flag should be hoisted up in the school buildings at certain occasions. So there's going to be the Irish language was going to be treated like any other secondary language, like French and so on, a European continental language, and there was going to be no spreading of the hatred and bile of Irish history from Catholic schools. So all those things were part of this recommendations that kind of form part of this act. So naturally, the Catholic Church was totally opposed to this act.
Naturally, you say that as if...
yeah, but they were never going to support this act. But surprisingly, and not so good for Lord Londonderry, all the Protestant denominations were opposed to it as well. So the Presbyterian Church, Church of Ireland, and the Methodist Church, they were all opposed to it because they didn't want to lose their control either. They wanted to control their schools. They didn't want people who didn't read the Bible teaching their children.
Right, and the Orange Order were very opposed to it, and the right wing of Craig's party, if even more right wing of Craig's Unionist Party,
there was a lot of right wing people, and more right wing than
were opposed to it as well. Yeah. So the situation we have today in Northern Ireland is we still have segregated education. I think only something like 7% of pupils are educated in formally integrated schools. The first integrated school in Northern Ireland was 1981. But we talk about segregated schools, we talk about Catholic schools, but there are some Protestants and Unionists will tell me, oh no, the state schools are open to everybody. They're not segregated. It's the Catholic Church that wants to be segregated. The state schools are open to everybody. But effectively, the state system that Northern Ireland introduced was a Protestant education system. Is that right?
Well,
is that fair?
I don't know if it's fair, but like the Catholic Church definitely did not want their flock, as Cardinal Michael Ogue said, going anywhere else other than being taught by you. And the Catholic Church took education more seriously than pretty much any other issue at this time. This was the biggest issue for the Catholic Church as an institution. Right. So this was where they invested a lot of time, a lot of resources into making sure that they would have control over Catholic education, essentially. So there was at the time of the birth of Northern Ireland, there was very little for Lord Londonderry to work with. There was no administration for education in Northern Ireland because it all had been run from Dublin before partition. There was schools. There was St Mary's College, the training school for females. That was the only one. So if you wanted to become a teacher from the north, you would, if you were a Catholic, you would have gone to St Patrick's at Drumcondra or De La Salle in Waterford. If you were a Church of Ireland, you would have gone to Kildare Place in Dublin to be trained. Right. And if you were Presbyterian, you would have gone, I think, Marlborough Street in Dublin. So they had to set up a training college, which was Stranmillis. But the Catholics couldn't go to that because the Catholic Church wouldn't employ them. The Catholic schools would not employ them. So then the Northern government came up with a kind of a stopgap measure. They sent them to St Mary's in Strawberry Hills in London. And paid for their education and board. Right. Hopefully, Catholics, Northern, because they wouldn't accept, the Northern government would not accept qualifications from the Irish government, Free State government, because it was going.
Well, sorry. Just to be clear, so before partition, there's one system in Ireland. There are Catholic schools, other Methodist schools, Presbyterian schools, Church of Ireland.
They're run by the churches. The church.
They all run by.
But there's a national kind of the Lord Lieutenant kind of oversees it all through a national board, and all there's representations from all the churches as well as judges and other lay people. But sorry,
Methodists and Presbyterians would all go to the same church, but they would have different, or would they have their own separate schools? Sorry, schools. Sorry, I meant schools. Yeah. Would there be a Methodist school and a Presbyterian school and a?
I don't know. Like I would presume there would be, depending on the numbers they had in a particular area. That they would have their own Presbyterian or Methodist or Church of Ireland school. But if it was a small area, they might. Yeah. I don't know. To answer how many were.
You see, I've already caught you out already. We're only 5 minutes in.
I know. I need to do it. I don't have the A level standard of education. I do apologise, but it was mainly run by the religious education before partition. Yeah. Though there was the state obviously intervened in terms of paying salaries, and but it was the churches were allowed to basically to run the schools the way they saw fit.
So before we get to Northern Ireland, down south, what happened after partition? Then just the system remained the same. Catholics went to Catholic schools, and Protestants went to their own schools.
Schools still are segregated in they
are
in south. Maybe not so much. It's not as obvious in outside of schools, the difference say between Catholics and Protestants. I'd never know who a Catholic or Protestant was. Meet someone on the street, you wouldn't ask the question, you know.
You know. Well, see, that's the first question here. If you want to find out what somebody's religion is, what school do you go to?
Yeah. Well, you wouldn't even ask. I'd never ask what schools you go to. You just wouldn't ask that question. It just doesn't come up. Like different sports, like so, people playing cricket or hockey generally would be Protestants in the south.
Right.
And rugby now would have been maybe, but a lot of Catholic schools play rugby as well. So that often was it, but it just doesn't come up the question to answer. Right. It doesn't come up as an issue. But there is segregation in education in the south. Obviously, but it's educate together now. There's a big effort to get a lot more in integrated schools. But growing up, it was pretty much all segregated schools.
Right. But here it's a political issue because the point is that the Catholic Church wants to maintain control of its schools and its own flock, and the Unionists and Protestants were going, well, we need to educate our own children in a way that isn't infected by the sort of Catholic nationalism. Is that right? effectively what they're saying
yeah,
here?
but they don't want control as well because they want to control the schools. So like it was basically the act that was proposed. The act went through, but it was amended so many times by 1935 that it's basically it embodies segregation. But the act recommended that there would be kind of education committees and local authorities would have a big say. Now the churches would be have their say too, and
be represented on the board of governors or something.
They were meant to be treated sensitively when it comes to education, but it was meant to be run from like local government essentially. To local authorities would run these education committees for the schools, and to me it was that the churches, all churches, Catholic and Protestant, were just did not want to give up control, and they all the churches as well were opposed to the diminution of religious studies as well in the curriculum. They were opposed to that. So a lot of people were saying that look, it could be a Catholic or a socialist that becomes a teacher of my children, children in my area, and they don't want to teach the Bible or things like that. So we don't want that. So whereas Catholics obviously were, would have been anti-British, would have been, wanted to teach Catholic doctrine to children.
Maths is maths and French is French, but Irish history there are two Irish histories, aren't there? There are different versions of Irish history. So they don't want that sort of thing. And then religion is obviously very, very important to them. Was this a genuine attempt by the Unionist government to say, well, we're going to have by Craig, for instance, to say, we'll integrate, we'll have one system?
Well, I think Unionist government is a bit broad. I think it was it's very closely associated with Lord Londonderry, the person more so than the Northern government, because the minute the Protestant churches, cry foul, like James Craig backpedals immediately, and I think Londonderry falls out with Craig after this, and he then leaves the cabinet in early 1926.
Right,
and he goes on to greater things. He actually becomes Secretary of State of for air in the British government.
For air. There's a lot of that about. What do you mean, like airplanes and stuff?
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. So RAF, he's over the RAF.
Right.
In the early 1930s. And he has to fight Treasury because they want to cut funding, and he says no, there's a threat and all of this. So I think he's responsible for getting radar, in place for the Second World War and more planes. But he doesn't do enough because Germany's rearming, and he's fired in 1935, and then he goes on a mission, kind of a mission to appease the Nazis. These aren't all that bad fellas. Let's have a pact between Britain and Germany. And he's wined and dined by Goring, and he meets Hitler. He thinks he's a fine man. His wife, Lady Londonderry, thinks one of the most impressive people I've ever met is Adolf Hitler. Great eyes.
Oh, lovely eyes.
Even Ribbentrop, who was
visited.
He visited Mount Stewart.
Mount Stewart, yeah.
Yeah, and the plane. There's a Newton Ards would you call it an airport, would you, or an airstrip?
An aerodrome. Let's go with aerodrome.
And,
Ribbentrop visits
with the SS and
presents him with a little SS statue, which you can still see.
You can still see the little stormtrooper, the white stormtroopers there.
But Ribbentrop was the foreign minister.
But he was ambassador. I think he was the ambassador of Britain at that stage, but then he becomes foreign minister afterwards.
He did the Nazi Soviet pact, didn't he?
He was. So it's him and Sev Molotov signed that in August 1939. But he comes over and they're obviously wooing Londonderry, not known for his intellect, to be honest with you. And Lord Londonderry was an ancestor of Lord Castlereagh.
Right. Yes. Mount Stewart, of course. Yeah.
Mount Stewart, exactly. Yeah. So, but he was trying to ape him. He even dressed like him, and he talked like him. He looked and acted like he was from a different century, basically.
Right.
So, he treated servants very poorly. The riding crop they used to walk around with. His face was shining almost. The way he through his morning treatment.
So
but
he
gets lulled into Nazi Germany, basically. He gets wooed by them, and he becomes the ultimate appeaser. And there's a lot of anti-Semitic stuff going on there as well. Like he's very reticent to criticise Germany at all, even though it's clear that they're having dreadful policies against Jews.
Right.
And he's more anti-communist, and he's. And his reputation.
You tend to be anti-communist if you have a lovely house, haven't you? Aren't you? You tend to be anti-communist.
Yeah, but he was one of UK's richest people, like biggest landowners, and they had coal mines up in North England as well.
Right.
So yeah, I could never see him being on
So he was a high
card-carrying member of the Communist Party. All right,
he was Lord Londonderry, so he wouldn't have got on well with the lads in the shipyard, would he? I mean, he'd come down, wouldn't be able to shake hands with
maybe the owners, but not the lads.
Not the lads. So he wouldn't have been. So would he have been viewed by suspicion by ordinary extraordinary unionist.
Yeah,
and
I
then
think
this
so. I
is-
think,
this is him.
and he wasn't an MP. He was a leader of the Senate. So
Oh, right. So
yeah,
he was right. Okay.
yeah, so
so
he was actually,
he wasn't elected. Well, is
Yeah.
Senate elected? I don't know.
No, I think they were nominated by the representation. Your representation in Northern Parliament,
Right.
meant I might cease again the Senate. So I think he was selected by the
Right.
government. So yeah, he was a leader of the Senate, and then he was education minister. So this was, I think it was his act, and he really wanted more integration and less of the religious element involved.
Right.
And he was pushed back. No, it was mainly because of the resistance of the Protestant churches.
Right.
But the Catholic Church was totally opposed, and the most opposed by a distant. But the Protestant churches essentially put the death knell to any prospects of
Because Craig was
integration.
in charge and they had more influence over
Yeah.
him, so they could have.
So it was they talked to Craig, and
Yeah.
then Craig basically
Yeah.
made sure the act was amended significantly.
But I suppose the Catholic Church would have gone, well, you can't really enforce one integrated education system in Northern Ireland. Could you in the 20s to the Catholic Church? There would have been an uprising, would there? I mean,
The whole education was
it?
a real thorny subject, and the way the South, the Free State out as well, was going to help towards good relations between North and South. So they used to share examinations together.
Right.
Because again, Northern Ireland was a new entity. Brand new kind of polity that was created, had no structures to
It's all brand new.
hold exams, mark exams, all of that. So so they had to start off using
own exam
the Free
boards and
State.
their own- yeah.
Exactly, yeah. But the Free State government, original Free State government that Michael Collins was chairperson of, they had a policy of obstruction and to ignore and not recognise Northern institutions.
Yeah.
And the biggest example of that policy was through education. So the Irish Free State provisional government told Catholic teachers, don't recognise the Ministry of Education, we'll pay your salaries. And about a third of the Catholic schools did that. They did not recognise the Northern government. So they were paid for by the Free State provisional government.
Not for very long, 'cause the Free State, this is costing a fortune, isn't it? How long did that last?
Well, actually, Collins was the biggest supporter of it when he dies in August 22. And then by that stage anyway, the Free State government was thinking this isn't working. It's not going to help towards unity.
Yeah.
So they and it's costing us an arm and a leg as well. So they stopped it in November 22.
Yeah.
But it obviously it actually was a further kind of example of the deterioration of relationships between North and South. And when it comes to matter of education, where there definitely could have been, say, in training colleges, because Northern Ireland had to create a new one, Stranmillis. There were the same areas already for the Catholic girls, but it was very messy. The whole college training thing was really messy, and even the examination things. So the Free State government started holding exams in the north for the Catholic schools who ignored the northern institutions. But they also asked for security help from the Northern government, because you provide security for. Lord Londonderry told him where to go basically for that. It was a bit cheeky.
Right.
So the basically, we're not recognising your Ministry of Education. The teachers have been paid by us. We're going to do exams in the Northern jurisdiction for those teachers, but you're going to have to provide the security for that.
Well, let me go back. I know I've mentioned this woman before. My great auntie, Cassie O'Hara, who was interned during the Second World War, was very anti-treaty and was a teacher.
Yeah.
And later on, if you were a teacher, you subsequently had to take an oath of allegiance to the king and to the Northern government. And what I heard was the story goes that mostly the priest would ring up and go, well, I've spoken to Cassie O'Hara, she's taken it, but she was very die-hard anti-treaty Republican, refused to take the oath or allow anybody to take the oath on her behalf, and lost her job as a teacher and ended up running a wee buttons and bows shop in Castle Street for the rest of her life, and lost her job as a teacher for her Republican principles.
But right, that was a massive issue. The oath, and I think the oath to the king wasn't well received, but people got over that. It was the oath to the Northern government.
Yeah, you had to pledge allegiance.
That was really stuck in the craw of a lot of people more so. Like even the GA. So GA had a ban on during the War of Independence. They had a ban on people having worked in civil service, British civil service,
because they had to take an oath.
And so if you took the oath and worked in civil service, you were kicked out of GA.
Really?
From 99, a motion was passed. So then this goes away in 21, 22 in the Free States form. But obviously the North. But they kind of sidestepped, said, no, it's okay. You can still remain a member of the GA if you're a teacher in the North, for example. And you have to take an oath.
Wow.
So they kind of sidestepped it with Ulster. was an All Ireland kind of issue beforehand. Right. But it was a serious issue, like for obviously.
So Lord Londonderry's Act falls. Craig kind of goes, all right, and the Catholic Church get to keep their schools, and Protestants get state schools in inverted commas. That's the way it works. Yeah,
pretty much. Yeah. The diminution of religion doesn't happen. So
right.
They're still basically the centres of education in the north,
right?
And that's probably the biggest reason why we have segregation in education.
Well, it's still a hot political potato because in this very studio, on another podcast, we had Gavin Robinson here, talking about integrated education, and he's not a fan. He's not a fan. He says no, that the state schools.
Paul Given, is he a fan?
No, he's not a fan either. He's under a statutory obligation according to the recent Education Act, but we'll look into that. In fact, he turned down a school that voted for integration in Bangor, and he's refusing to go with that. But anyway, we have DUP leader in here basically saying that the state schools, the Protestant schools, state schools, he says aren't really Protestant, they're state schools, and anybody can join them. They're integrated. Anybody can go them. Whereas the Catholic schools, you have to be a Catholic, which isn't necessarily true. That's kind of blurring on the edges.
You were in St. Malachi's.
I was a St. Malachi's boy.
But was it all Catholics?
Yeah. Oh God, yes.
No. They. Do you know what I found interesting? I'm doing a bit of research on the Jewish community in Dublin. The Jewish children generally went to Protestant schools, not Catholic schools.
Is that right?
I find interesting in Dublin. Yeah.
Right.
So maybe it was just.
We would have got a better education with us. No, I was the Christian brother. Yeah, Christian Brothers on the Antrim Road, and then St. Malachi's College. But yeah, those days. I mean, it's still the case. I mean, it is blurring slightly around the edges, and more people. They have surveys every time, and the public say yes, they would like children to be integrated when they go to educate, 80-90%, but still only 7% are formally integrated because we have this weird hybrid system. Now, to be fair, there are a lot of state schools. There's one on the Antrim Road there, BRA, Belfast Royal Academy, which is virtually an integrated school, but not in name.
So there is a good mix.
Oh, there's a good mix. An awful lot of Catholics would go there, and of course Northern Ireland's changing as well. With a lot of people from outside and all of that. So it is changing.
That actually
around the edges.
kind of lessens the tension, I find. The new nationalities, people who aren't involved in the conflicts or from that divide. It kind of, I think, puts some of the heat out of it. Yeah.
But at the same time, I mean, the argument in favour of integrated education is if you educate your children separately, Catholic kids all go to one school and Protestant kids all go to a different school, that they don't get to meet, they don't understand each other. Then this enshrines sectarianism, it hardens it, it copper fastens it, and then you'll find that, all the Catholics then come out and they're nationalists, and all the Protestant kids come out of their school, and bizarrely they're all unionists. Whereas there's no meeting of mind, and this basically reinforces segregation and sectarianism.
Oh, and it does, It's a hard argument to disagree with,
Yes,
and we look at the Good Friday Agreement signed.
There weren't any. There aren't many.
25 years ago, but there's still a huge divide. It's still that huge kind of chasm, within society, and I think segregated education is a big reason for that.
Yeah, and we still educate our teachers separately. There was a move to amalgamate St Mary's and Stranmillis recently, which the Shinners vehemently opposed.
Why?
Because they like having St Mary's on the Falls Road, and they vehemently opposed it. So the Shinners, technically, I think their policy is, we're kind of in favour of integrated education, but they're not really. So it's still a big hot political potato.
Absolutely. Well, obviously since the Paul Given situation with the Bangor, and there was two schools at the time, wasn't there?
Two schools, they
rejected.
The
department actually had approved that it should be integrated.
No, there's a new act has been. The Stormont passed a new act saying that the Northern Ireland government Stormont has to promote integrated education wherever, and they're not following that. Various judicial reviews have been taken about whether or not they are promoting it properly. But we still educate our kids separately, and most of our kids separately, and most of our teachers separately, which is kind of bizarre. 100 years on, isn't it?
Yeah. And the body you're involved in integrated, do you think you're making any headway? Or
Well, they are. I mean, more and more people do. I think are seeing that that's the way forward, and I think most people have, especially after the Troubles have ended. A lot of kids now would go, I don't know the difference between Catholics and Protestants. It's less that we've become a far more secular society. The influence of the church has,
dramatically
declined both in the Catholic Church and in Protestant churches as well. You know,
Yeah,
few people take religion as seriously as they used to 100 years ago, but we still have the situation where the vast majority of Protestant kids will go to a school
State
where there are virtually no Catholics and vice versa, you know, which is a sad situation. So, which is why you should buy a ticket to the Integrated Education Fund.
In Ulster Hall.
Stand up for integrated education in the Ulster Hall. I can't remember what date it is. Sometime in October, but I'm working for nothing. It's not right.
Sure, you're not here as well. You're doing it for love of history, aren't you?
Shut up. I am. Yeah, I love my Irish history. You know that. What else were we going to talk about? We were going to talk about. There's a question. Do you want to talk about the question that we have, or do you want? No, tell you no. I want to talk about this story that you mentioned to me. June the 10th, 1925. Can I read this little bit?
Yeah. Of course, yeah.
Sequel to a terrible crime. Free State ex-officer charged with murder of military policeman. The trial began in the Dublin Central Court, was adjourned to the day of James Murray, an ex-captain of the Free State Army charged with murdering James Bergen, a Free State military policeman, on December the 13th, 1923. The Crown case that the prisoner had frequently reported on Bergen and was deputed to interview him and, if possible, get a confession or an undertaking that he would loyally serve the state. Following a visit to Kildare, prisoner said he had seen Bergen and found a large quantity of documents on him. Bergen's body was subsequently found in a canal with several bullet wounds, while bloodstains were found in the motor car which was used by prisoner and which was abandoned in a Dublin street. Murray was subsequently convicted of the murder of Joseph Bergen, one of the last killings from the long aftermath of the end of the Irish Civil War. And you and I were talking about this, saying that there was a lot of violence still in the Republic of in the Free State.
Yeah.
A kind of a hangover from the Civil War, which ended formally in May 23, wasn't it?
Yeah, so the dumping of arms
Yes.
was May 23, but and a lot of it was actually perpetrated by Free State Army officers.
So not Republican, the irregulars and all of they dumped their arms.
Well, they were all most of them were interned or in prison. 13,000 of them were in prison.
13,000.
And there was a massive hunger strike in October 1923. About 8,000 going hunger strike, which is one of the reasons why it failed, because 8,000 going hunger strike.
Yeah, it's bound to be somebody
minute one
going.
gets hungry, you know, and then goes off it.
Oh, I wouldn't have lasted to lunchtime. I'd have been no good on that. Yeah.
Yeah, but it was a disaster as a hunger strike. But there was huge numbers of Republicans interned. So, but the highest profile murder was that of Noel Lamass, brother of Sean Lamass, and he was literally walking down the street in Dublin in July. He was picked up by, they were called the Dublin Murder Gang, and they're in the Free State Army. You know, they picked up Noel Lamass, and we don't know where exactly they killed him, but his body was found months later in October 23, badly mutilated, like he was tortured beforehand. And
what was the motivation for that? Just he was
Republican.
And that's right.
Joseph Bergen was in the Free State Army. He's from Laois originally. And he was believed to have turned to the other side, gone Republican. So he went rogue, and they had to dragged him back of a car and then shot him, and they threw in his hat to his girlfriend's house and all this. So it was a pretty murky. That was December 23.
Yeah.
So this is good, like 7-8 months after the so-called end of the Civil War.
Yeah,
and there was quite a lot of these. Actually, there was 2 Jewish people killed. There was a guy from Manchester. He was a salesperson, a travelling salesperson. He was shot dead in St. Stephen's Green in October. 2 weeks later, a guy called Emmanuel Khan, he was a 24-year-old Jewish man, and he was at a Jewish social club in Harrington Street. Himself and his friend were walking out of the club, and they were accosted by two people and asked, "What's your name? What religion are you?" And when they were told Jewish, were shot. And they were
for being Jewish.
Just two murders in 2 weeks.
Wow.
And there was 2 and there was Free State
So
Army.
was the Free State Army basically out of control here?
Yeah, there was elements in the Free State Army were out of control. There was a mutiny as well in early in 24.
Even though they'd won the war. Technically,
well, they had won that militarily. The Civil War they'd won decisively.
Probably the anti-treaty IRA basically surrendered, dumped arms, surrender, but they dumped arms, and then basically, but the Free State were running around still shooting people.
It was called a murder gang. So they were a lot of these guys were in Michael Collins' squad,
right?
And they kind of became peripheral figures after Collins died, and also by Collins being killed. They were very loyal to Collins.
Right. So this is kind of
there's revenge as well at that. You know, there was a lot of extrajudicial killings after Collins was killed. On the week of his body lying in state and all of that, there was 2 young lads killed up in I think Clontarf Park in Dublin. Alf Colley was one, Sean Colding was the other. There were only young lads, the Fianna lads, they're teenagers. They were killed for no reason.
And they carried out some awful atrocities as well. Then they put a bunch of guys, attached them to a bomb and blew up.
So that was Paddy O'Daly and David Nelligan. So they would have been part of the Dublin kind of group that went down to Kerry, ran the kind of Free State Army operation in Kerry, and they committed awful atrocities. The worst one, which is well known, is Ballyseedy. So they basically a couple of days beforehand in there was a landmine that went off, prematurely went off, and I think 4 or 5 Free State soldiers were killed. So they rounded up 9 Republicans from a jail in Tralee, brought them out to.
They were in jail.
They were in jail. Right. Yeah. And they brought them out to a place called Ballyseedy, close to Tralee, tied them up to a tree, and put a landmine in the middle of them. And there were 9 of them. 8 of them died, and one of them he. Was it Marta? I can't remember his forename escaped me. He became a Fianna Fáil TD for a period. He miraculously he jumps up, or he's pulls it into the air, lands into a field. He's badly injured, brutally injured, but he survives, fully survives. And he's the one that tells the story of what happened.
Wow.
And that happened. There was a couple of instances like that in Kerry at the time. So these guys,
they were out of control then.
They were out of control. They were committing rapes. They were like doing awful things, beating up people. They were killing people, just civilians. And they continued doing this for a while, and because they were in the Free State Army, no justice like this guy James Murray became a bit of a scapegoat for the killing of Joseph Bergen, but there were a lot of others involved, and there were senior figures as well, and kind of a blind eye was cast on him because it was very embarrassing for the government.
David Hume, my good friend with the Orange Order, said there was a famous incident. I think it's 24, is it 1924, 25, where it is that those same elements, Free State elements, or blew up the obelisk at the Battle of the Boyne, the site of the Battle of the Boyne. Oh,
was it Free State that did that? Was it?
Yeah, it was Free State, because it wasn't the regulars, because I think the Civil War had ended. It was Free State soldiers who blew up this obelisk, which had stood at the site of the Battle of the Boyne, and was, I think at one stage, was the biggest structure in Europe, or something stupid like that. And he says, from an Orange Unionist perspective, this sent out a signal to Unionists, so thank you very much. This is what the new Free State is going to be like. We're not going to be welcomed or anything like that. It may well have been rogue elements, but that's kind of a sign of A, the lawlessness, and B, they're pretty sectorian as well. Yeah.
Well, look, I'm sure the unions could say that. But
I'm sure that was, but that was one incident.
Excuses, Yeah, but look, there was a lot of extrajudicial carry on, and there were a lot of these guys. Like say, if you look what they did during the War of Independence, if you were the squad, you're an assassin.
Yeah.
You were literally going up beside them and shoot them in the head. So this was like, really psychologically, it was a very difficult thing to do, and it clearly had huge effects on them afterwards as well. And they went rogue, and they were became psychos basically, they did some awful things, and the Free State government didn't want to punish them because it was on them as well. Yeah. So it was a lot of these things were covered up.
When was the mutiny then? The mutiny was in
March 24.
24. Yeah. And how was that put down, or what did they do, or did
they went actually very lightly on them. They kind of took it out. So Richard Mulcahy was the head of the army. When Collins died, he became head of the army, and he so there was. He was in the IRB, or the IRB,
Irish Republican Brotherhood.
Irish Republican Brotherhood. They were kind of a secret society. But then there was another secret society called the official IRA, which was these squad boys, and they weren't in the IRB, and they felt that the IRB was taking kind of their power, and they were losing their power as well. And plus, they felt the Free State Army was hiring soldiers who fought in the British Army during the First World War, and they were being sidelined, even though they had done all the dirty work in the War of Independence. Right. So these guys, there's a guy called Tobin and Dalton, Charlie Dalton. They were the ringleaders of the mutiny, and so they basically had demands that we want, because they were losing all their jobs as well. So once the Civil War was open, there was about 55,000 in the army, but the army had to be reduced. The state couldn't pay for it. And they didn't need that massive army as well. So they were all losing, loads of them were losing their jobs. They had already lost a lot of their power. And so they want mutinies that, a lot of people keep their jobs. They wanted an Irish Republic as well. I think they wanted to abolish the Boundary Commission. So all these demands, it was put down, but it was they didn't suffer at all. Like they actually weren't imprisoned or escaped very lightly. Whereas Mulcahy had to resign, and the actual existing army officers, the heads of the army, had to resign, as opposed to the mutineers.
Right.
So they kind of got away with it, and it was kind of a power play in the Free State government as well. So Kevin O'Higgins basically was fighting against Richard Mulcahy politically, and Kevin O'Higgins won that battle and basically got rid of Mulcahy. Mulcahy resigned from the government. So it was
basically chaos after the Civil War. I mean, the Civil War caused huge.
It's still a mess. The whole thing is a mess.
Infrastructure mess and blowing up train stations and all that. But there was lawlessness was kind of on both sides then. I mean,
on both sides,
the irregulars were attacked for being anarchists and so on, but the Free State Army were basically doing the same.
But they were allowed to do what they wanted, and there was no repercussion. So, and a lot of people did take the law in their own hands.
It kind of gives you a perspective as well. And when you then talk about things like the Boundary Commission, you can see where the Irish government kind of maybe took its eye off the ball. It was spinning a lot of plates at the time, wasn't it? The economic crisis, military crisis, anarchy on the streets, all sorts of things happening at the same time.
But that actually leads on to, I think, another article here about Boundary Commission still sitting, and it actually talks about Owen McNeill. So it's
ex-Malachian.
Exactly. Not as famous as a certain Tim McGarry.
Yeah, he went to the same school as me. Yeah,
but wouldn't be famous though, would he?
Not at the same time. Well, he's got a blue plaque outside.
Where's yours?
He's got a blue. Well, I think I have to die first.
That's in 60 years from now. Boundary Commission still sitting. Will the Boundary Commission conclude its deliberations before the autumn session or within 2 years? This question was asked in the Dáil, not apropos of the boundary at all, but because its prolonged proceedings and wearisome delays has resulted in leaving the Department of Education without a minister to answer questions, reply to criticisms, or explain the policy of the government in connection with problems of vital importance. So basically, as you said, like this government is in chaos. They've so much on their plate. They're riddled in debt. They're really, really struggling. But their commissioner, the Free State Commissioner of the Boundary Commission, is the Minister for Education, Owen McNeill. Which is a crazy decision when it comes back to W.T. Cosgraves, and
that's our really friend who we talked about before, who made several mistakes, but he decided that the Southern Government Commissioner, had to be a Catholic, had to be from the North, and had to be a cabinet minister.
Yeah.
3 of which were kind of irrelevant to the. Surely you'd have thought.
Oh, completely irrelevant. To me, if I was choosing the Boundary Commissioner, someone from a legal background would have been and someone who actually would have fought our corner as well. Right. But
well, he's Minister of Education. He's supposed to be in charge of the whole education system for the Republic. Keep calling it the Republic, for the Free State. For the Free State, he's the Education Minister, and he's busy wandering around the fields of Petticoat, looking at the lines and going.
And he's has to go over to the London lot because the headquarters of the Boundary Commission is in Clements Inn in London. So there's and the other 2 commissioners are full-time commissioners. Yeah. So you've got Richard Feetham, the chairman, he's full-time, and then Joseph Fisher is full-time as well for the duration commission. And everyone's annoyed with McNeill because the people who he's answerable to in the Free State, they're annoyed because he's not given 100% to the Department of Education. And the Boundary Commission is annoyed because he doesn't turn up for a lot of meetings, or have to postpone meetings because he's not available because he's doing his Department of Education stuff. So it was a terrible decision. As you said, when Cosgrave decided in summer of 1923 who the commissioner was going to be, he creates these rules themselves. Like, has to be a Catholic, has to be from Ulster, has to be a cabinet minister. And the reason why he said was I want someone I can trust. Presumably couldn't trust anyone else in the entire kind of government apparatus or his party apparatus. He couldn't trust anyone else with the skills to be the Boundary Commission. Yeah. A lot of people said the Boundary Commissioner should have been Owen McNeill's brother, James. Yeah. He was the High Commissioner in London at the time. He subsequently became a Governor General of the Free State. And he definitely was a lot more skillful, a lot more in tune with politics and playing the game as such. Because this was a political game. It wasn't any other game really. And Owen McNeill was totally unsuited. Yeah. But part of that was that he was totally stretched. A full-time Minister of Education. There was only seven cabinet ministers as well, And
7.
Only 7. I can imagine the pressure they were under. You know, with a brand new state. You know, you're creating a whole.
We've
new
about 173 ministers for Northern Ireland.
I know, exactly. Yeah. And how many spads as well do you have?
And it's SPAD. So there's 7 lads running the entire republic, and I mean lads because there are no women, of course, involved in those days.
Of course, yeah.
7 lads running the entire state.
Yeah. And then you know, is it surprising that he did a poor job at the Boundary Commission?
Yeah.
You know.
So he did lots of jobs and didn't do any of them well.
No, he did, but it was a bone of contention for people at the time because
you could read more, by the way, if you want to see an excellent book, The Root of All Evil by Cormac about the Boundary Commission. You have more details about Owen McNeill and what he got up to.
We'll definitely be talking about that in November anyway.
Will we? Yeah, I'm sure.
When the fallout from the Boundary Commission happens, you know.
By the way, ladies and gentlemen, you can get in touch at any time on WhatsApp or email. If you have any questions at all, send us a WhatsApp message on 07483 313 842, or you can drop us an email at irishhistoryboys@gmail.com, and I'm going to try and pick up one email that we got recently. Hang on a second. Joe Connor asked a question, and Joe Connor said, "Good afternoon, gentlemen."
Gentlemen, first time I've ever been called that.
I'm really enjoying your podcast. Keep up the great work. Tim's great. I don't know why you have to carry that fella. Oh, no, he didn't write that. One thing that was not mentioned during your podcast was in relation to Northern Ireland's participation in the Commonwealth Games. Yeah. This is a bit of a skewer. When Northern Ireland wins a gold medal, the anthem used is the Londonderry air, Danny Boy. When England win a gold medal, the land of hope and glory has been played. Scotland abandoned. Scotland the brave at sporting events were and he wants to know what should we play at the Commonwealth Games. And I want to talk to you about the South and the Commonwealth and why they don't like the Commonwealth and why they don't join the Commonwealth.
I thought we were talking about anthems.
Do you want to talk about anthems then?
We can talk about both, but yeah, look, the anthems. Yeah, look, it just shows.
You love a good anthem.
It just shows how complicated the whole issue is around sports, and we obviously discussed this in detail in that episode. And look. Fair play, Joe, for bringing the Commonwealth Games up, because you have like Rhys McClelland, you the great gymnast. He represents Ireland in the Olympics, where the tricolour is flown and the Aaron Aveen is played, and then he represents Northern Ireland in the Commonwealth Games.
Barry McGuigan, I think, started at the Commonwealth
Games. He was actually from Monaghan, not from the North. There's a bit of controversy over that. Yeah, and famously Wayne McCullough, he actually. From East Belfast, he actually carried the Republic, the tricolour in 1988 in Seoul.
The Olympics.
At the Olympics, he's from Shankill, he obviously represented Northern Ireland in the.
I think Barry McGuigan's manager Barney Eastwood told him, "Great news, you're becoming British." Partly because he said he become British champion, which led to greater things rather than being an Irish champion was fine but not great. Where British champion opened up far more doors, but also yes, you're right. He fought for the Commonwealth as well.
Yeah.
But the anthem issue is it's still going on. Where we had discussed this before about Rory McIlroy having the Ulster banner flying when he won the Masters or whatever he won. I don't follow golf. Rhys McClellan.
The Masters,
I don't know.
We're in Hollywood. We're in the home.
That's right. We're in his home. Sorry, Rory. What am I talking about? He's not here. He's in one of his mansions in America. Anyway, the point is Rhys McClellan and stuff, people like that, sometimes represents the UK and sometimes represents the South. He won the gold for Ireland, didn't he?
He won, the Pommel in the Olympics.
And I suppose if you're an athlete, you don't give a flying fiddlers what they play. If you're winning,
some people
medal, you go.
Well, James McLean now obviously is very outspoken on his feelings on the anthem, the Poppy, for example. All those issues. So it depends on the athlete, of course.
But he's in Derry. They're like that in Derry.
What were we saying about Derry in the previous episode?
Love Derry. Great place.
And the people?
Yeah. So what you basically say, we need one anthem for all of Ireland. Then,
I'm not saying that. I'm saying it's complicated.
I'm trying to get you. I'm going to get some controvery going
I'm
here.
certainly not. I'm saying it's complicated. So it's all of these are into the melting pot, that stewing pot, and then we, hopefully we'll get a better song than Ireland is called from Phil Coulter.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of that. But Ireland and the Commonwealth, their relationship has always been a bit of. It's one of those things that's dangled every now and again.
What relationship? There is no relationship.
That's what I'm saying. It's always kind of dangled, as a kind of, as a sop to unionists that Ireland would join the Commonwealth. I was going to say rejoin, but they're never in it. So they rejoin.
Well, they weren't in it until 49. They left obviously when it became a republic.
Oh right, sorry, yes.
Yeah. I think that's going to be difficult. I would think, I personally would think that getting over the flag and the anthem changing those would work. I think in the South overall.
Yeah.
if people got United Ireland. But I think rejoin the Commonwealth, I just don't see it as a runner. But, like, Ireland's a very now is a very the proud country. It's got its independence. It's a very confident kind of secular country now. I just don't see it going, okay, we're going to kind of be part of the British Commonwealth. I just don't see that catching on.
Well, Joe, thank you very much for your question. We're going to finish on one story that you wanted to talk about because it's very important to you as in your life. The very fact you're here at all. In June of the 12th, 1975, the Irish News reporting that a report had come out about the assassination of JFK in 1963, and there was no evidence of the CIA taking part, according to the Rockefeller Commission, that it found no credible evidence to support two theories of CIA involvement in President John F. Kennedy's assassination in November 1963. And this is very important. Famous question is, in my day, not anymore, young people won't remember this, but people in my generation, everybody's going, where were you when President JFK? Because the world stopped when he was assassinated. It was one of those world events that kind of literally the world stopped. Dances and cinemas and everything. This was the biggest news that hit the world, in the television age and stuff like that. Everyone went, where were you when Kennedy was assassinated? And I can answer that question. I was gestating. Because I was born in June 1963, so I was. I cannot be blamed. I had no part in the murder of John F. Kennedy.
Well, I'm alive today because of JFK being assassinated.
You are alive today.
Yeah. Because my parents, they were at a dance in Laois.
Right.
And the dance stopped, and all tables were put out the dance hall, and radios were put beside the tables, and everyone went to different table to hear the news from Dallas that JFK had been shot, and my parents sat beside each other listening to the radio, and they started talking, and and the rest is to go as history.
Blossomed over a man being assassinated.
Yes.
That's very romantic, isn't it?
Well, he had just been to Ireland like June of that year.
That's right.
He was, there was many homes with a picture of the Sacred Heart, the Pope, and JFK.
Still are.
I'm sure.
My mother, big fan.
So the reason why I exist is because
the
of
reason
JFK.
why you are here. We can thank
because JFK got assassinated.
Thank you, Lee Harvey Oswald. The world is grateful.
Or was it Lee Harvey Oswald?
Yes. Well, according to the Rockefeller Commission, and then our friend Donald Trump released some papers recently as well.
Of course, Donald Trump.
And you're not a conspiracy theorist. You think it was Lee Harvey Oswald? You don't think?
I'm definitely not a conspiracy theorist. No, I don't know, to be honest with you, but look, the evidence does suggest it was Lee Harvey Oswald alone, but I don't know.
Man acting on his own. What else? I think I tend to agree with you. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we've come to the end of this thing. Thank you. Very good discussion. Just to remind you, get in touch anytime. Ask us any questions at all. Make them nice and hard for Cormac, because he's a doctorate. He can answer anything you want. Send us WhatsApp messages.
I got a few wrong there.
Or drop us an email on irishhistoryboys@gmail.com, and we will see you next time.
See you next time.